Good morning, everybody, and thank you for joining us today. Whether this is your first session or your third, I am so happy to see you here today. I hope that you will please attend one of our final remaining event today in this series, the Multi-Faith Panel, this afternoon at 1 p.m. The sign-on information is exactly the same as you used for this morning. If this is your first hop-in, let me give you a quick orientation. On the left side of your screen, you will find resources we have provided in the Expo section. On the stage, you will find the PSA that Tabitha Walker of Big Hair Productions made for this event. If you haven't seen it, please take a moment to watch it. It is absolutely amazing. On the right side of your screen view, there are tabs for event and session. Right now, we are all in the session, so use that set of tabs, please. At the end of each panel, as time allows, we will try to answer questions from the audience. So use the Q&A section under the session tab to submit any questions you might have. So why are we doing this? In the wake of the recent effort to enact a comprehensive civil rights ordinance for Macon-Bibb County, many in our community on both sides of the discussion cited the need for education regarding why a local ordinance is necessary and what effects it would have on the community. Additionally, many questions arose about recent court rulings and how discrimination laws are currently written and interpreted. Business owners asked what local non-discrimination protections would mean for small businesses. Finally, in some cases, erroneous and fear-inciting information was spread in the community and the focus taken away from the large number of people these type laws are meant to protect. People of color, residents whose country of origin was outside the United States, our military veterans, women, and those who are differently abled. In an effort to address these concerns and provide a forum for discussion, we will use these sessions to explore all facets of local non-discrimination ordinance. This event is possible through an on-the-table mini grant from the Community Foundation of Central Georgia and the Knight Foundation, along with sponsorships from Georgia Equality, Charles E. Cox Jr., Attorney at Law, Travis Jean Emporium, Dozier Law Firm, and Georgia Women and Those Who Stand With Us. This panel is hosted by Macon Magazine. The moderator for this panel is my friend Susanna Maddox. Susanna Cox Maddox is the owner, publisher, and editor-in-chief of Macon Magazine, a bi-monthly publication in its 35th year that seeks, shares, and celebrates the good life and great stories in Macon and surrounding region. Maddox also co-founded The Web, a women-centered work club headquartered in downtown Macon that offers community, workspace, and online programming, as well as an active network of support for the work-life blend. She graduated from North Carolina State University with a Bachelor of Arts degree in communications, and she and her husband Tripp are parents to daughter Kitty and son Henry. Susanna currently serves on the boards of the Bibb County Community Partnership, Historic Macon Foundation, and Friends of Rosa Parks Square, and is a member of Macon Rotary, Knight Foundation Community Advisory Committee, and Macon Mercer Symphony Orchestra Outreach Committee. Susanna and her family are active at Christ Church Episcopal. Thank you, Susanna. I'm turning it over to you.
Thank you, my brother Scott. Thank you so much. I feel like I just got on the tube and like I'm in this space of being catapulted to an airplane, and I feel as safe as I possibly can right now. So thank you for that awesome introduction. It's so good to see your face and to feel your energy even through the screen. And thank you all for joining us this morning on a Friday morning. And forgive me, I'll have to say up front that I am definitely dealing with some allergies this week. And so I've got my water handy for sure, but really I'm just so excited to be here, and all of the praise goes to the people on this panel. I just get to be a part of it and get to be a part of this audience with all of you and talking about this really important conversation. And I'm thankful that this committee that has planned this has been so diligent and intentional and focused about primarily the education. And I think we all agree that knowledge is power. And I hope that if nothing else, you walk away with something new that you've learned today. And I hope that you feel engaged to, once again, turn your head to Macon and turn toward what it is that you're reminded of, why this place is, why we call it home, and why it's the heart of Central Georgia. And so something that I wanted to share this morning is if you don't know, I think that there are a lot of people that that may have heard of the acronym CCR, and they've heard that it's something they might need to pay attention to, they might need to consider, but maybe you, like me, oftentimes have a question. What is a local comprehensive civil rights ordinance? And so allow me to share this. Thank you to Claire for passing this along with me, a really easy explanation, I believe. Because Georgia state laws provides no general civil rights protections and Georgians are dependent on federal civil rights laws, many municipalities are enacting non-discrimination protections at the local level. The protections are known as local comprehensive civil rights ordinances, or sometimes as non-discrimination ordinances. They typically, as the one passed and vetoed in Macon did in 2020, provide protections in housing, employment, and accommodations, and protect residents based on numerous categories: race, religion, country of origin, sex, military status, disability, sexual orientation, and gender identity. These ordinances put in place a mechanism, a mediation process that elevates to a hearing and a fine depending on the circumstances, to resolve complaints without the drawn-out process of a suit in the federal court system. So I hope that provides a little bit of the groundwork for why we're here talking about this today. And something that I wanted to share, I hope that you've gotten to tune in to the previous two sessions. And again, there'll be another session today at 1 o'clock. I hope you'll tune into that too for a focus on faith. But I really appreciated hearing some about of course, the legal side of things, and then from our Black and Brown Georgia NAACP yesterday evening. But one point that I wanted to make is that this, we're talking about all different types of people that this ordinance speaks to and speaks for. And a point that I wanted to make that I especially learned yesterday is that this provides protection for everyone. And one of the points that they made, of course, in the legal panel yesterday was that this includes white males. So, for example, if you as a white male, who I just think that that's a group that perhaps is thinking, no, this includes me, but I was enlightened yesterday to realize that if something were to come against you as a white male, this would protect you too. And so, again, it's for everyone. And I think that that's probably a good way to move forward in this conversation too. And so without further ado, I'm thrilled again to share with you, my friends and colleagues on this panel. And what we're gonna do is I'm just gonna announce their name and then they are gonna introduce themselves. So Charlie Cox, Macon civil rights attorney.
I'm Charlie Cox. I'm an attorney here in Macon. I've been practicing law here for decades, which sounds ominous. I was a federal prosecutor for a few years, and I've been in private practice since 1995. Practice in the areas of criminal defense, employment law, civil rights litigation, and that's really the civil rights litigation and employment law aspect is what has drawn me to this. So I'm excited to participate in this and share some insight, both as a lawyer who represents plaintiffs in employment cases, a lawyer who litigates civil rights cases, and an employer here in the city of Macon. So happy to participate.
Thank you. We're glad you're here, Charlie. Dr. Bethany Rogers, Director of Business and Real Estate Development. Although there may be a new title that you're going to share here.
That is correct. I have technically been promoted, I'm proud to say. So yes, Dr. Bethany Rogers, I actually have a PhD in cultural geography. So a lot of my academic work, and then as I started to work my way out of the academic realm and into becoming a community practitioner, a lot of my work initially was with downtown development, economic development, and historic preservation. When I came to Macon 5 years ago, I'm from Kentucky originally and had lived in New Orleans my adult life. I served first as Director of Business and Real Estate Development. The demand has been so great to support, in particular, our female entrepreneurs and our entrepreneurs of color, that we have really grown the lending arm of Newtown Macon, and we've created an arm called Newtown Loans. It's a community development financial institution. And so our mission there is to provide not just the capital that a lot of people have been systemically denied to start or expand businesses or to purchase property and develop it, but also to provide the networking, the coaching, and the other kinds of technical resources that folks need to be successful in getting that money and just being sustainable and successful.
Thank you. We're glad you're here, Bethany. Sharice Stevens, Macon Director of Small Business Affairs, a new role for her team, but I think something she was destined to do. So without further ado, Sharice.
Hi everyone. I'm a true Maconite. I was born here, true country girl. I've been tasked with being the Director of the Office of Small Business Affairs by our Honorable Mayor Lester M. Miller. He has had a true focus on supporting our small businesses and just really the economic vitality of our whole community. What our office does is we provide technical assistance, and knowing me, everybody knows I'm an entrepreneur at heart, so I do a lot of hand-holding and personalized attention because small businesses are the backbone of our community. And I concur with Dr. Bethany. Women are, for 2021, is going to make some things happen here in Macon. And Suzanne, everything you're doing with the web is supporting that. So there's a lot of great things that are happening here in Macon-Bibb County. I'm a mom of 2 adult kids that I love dearly, Camden and Kayla. And I'm just excited to get an opportunity to talk a little bit more about what this would mean for Macon-Bibb County.
Thank you. We're glad you're here, Sharice. And I'll also just share that Emily Wright of Adams Law Firm, an attorney here, could not join us, unfortunately, work calls. But I reached out and asked her to share a response about this conversation from her own experience. And she said, I planned to speak about my experience working in management of small businesses prior to becoming a lawyer. What I experienced was that folks in my small businesses have a general terror of discrimination lawsuits, but do not have a good understanding of what is actually prohibited, conduct, or how to manage claims or complaints by employees and customers. As I became an attorney, I realized that a clear, predictable process for managing such complaints would really give small business owners much needed guidance and peace of mind. I think many folks believe a CCR ordinance would cause additional headaches or fear for small business owners. But creating a local, inexpensive process for managing discrimination claims will save small business owners money and reduce the existing fear of expensive litigation. So I think that's another good foot to push us forward on. And I'll just share too, I think Scott sort of mentioned this, but we've got some questions prepared and we've got some things that we want to talk about here for sure. And but I encourage you all listening today, don't hesitate to tell somebody to join in whenever, join in the conversation, hop in and leave as you need to, but also feel free to leave a question in the Q&A section over to the left, right of your screen. But leave questions there, and thanks to Scott, he's going to be helping us see those questions so that we can hopefully pull in some of those audience questions. So to kick us off, Charlie, as the lawyer of the group, please explain what this ordinance will mean legally and practically for me as a business owner if a comprehensive civil rights ordinance is passed in Macon-Bibb. And I've got a list of 4 things, and these are, and we can go back to them, but these are the things we're going to talk about. How much is it going to cost? Is there anything I have to do, such as record keeping as a result of a CCR? In what context or instances does a CCR apply? Do I have to make all bathrooms unisex? Charlie.
Well, thank you for the question. I realize we only have an hour and a half to address this, so I'll try to fit everything in within that time frame. Of course, there's not currently a CCR ordinance on the table. There was one last year that was passed by the council at least. And so some of what I'll do, we'll talk about the CCR ordinance that was considered last year and what it hoped to do, in part because that was patterned in large part after other CCR ordinances around the state. And that ordinance, and I think any CCR ordinance really would focus on three areas. One would be employment, one would be the sale or rental of property, real estate, and then the non-discrimination in places of public accommodation. And in all three of those areas, the ordinance would prohibit discrimination based on some of the factors that I think most of us are familiar with, such as race, religion, color, sex, disability, national origin, ancestry, and military status. The CCR ordinance or the CCR ordinances around the state, and I would anticipate and hope that one passed by Macon would also include sexual orientation and gender identity. These are not really new concepts. To a large extent, all of these areas are protected to some degree or another by federal law, but not everybody is covered by federal law. That is very briefly generally what the ordinance would hope to do, or what a CCR ordinance would hope to do. And so what's this going to cost me? One disclaimer, I became a lawyer because I can't add or subtract. So numbers are not my game. But what's it going to cost me really is, I think, the question of, is this negatively going to impact my business? And the one piece of advice that I got when I first went out into practice is a fellow lawyer told me that every decision you make either makes you money or costs you money. And that was about the best advice I've gotten. And so when you look at the CCR ordinance, that applies as well. Is it going to make me money or is it going to cost me money? And at least from my perspective, I think having an ordinance where everybody is prohibited from discriminating on these grounds will ultimately make you money. To have an open and inclusive environment in your business, places of accommodation, it's not going to create paperwork requirements. There are no real paperwork requirements, I don't think. Part of your question related to record keeping, there would not be specific record keeping requirements in the CCR ordinance, but every business has record keeping requirements, either required by law or just required by good business practices. Putting aside non-discrimination laws, every business needs to keep good records of employee performances just for purposes of dealing with claims of unemployment. Because if you terminate an employee who's been unsatisfactory and you get to the unemployment hearing and you tell the hearing officer, well, I fired this person because he or she was not a good employee, they weren't doing what they were supposed to, and the hearing officer is going to say, okay, well, tell me when you counseled this employee about it. Well, I know I talked to him. Well, do you have a record of it? No, I don't. And pretty soon at the end of the day, that employer is going to be paying unemployment compensation for that employee. So regardless of a CCR ordinance, there are just good business practices to maintain a record of the decisions you make and why you make them. Do I have to make all bathrooms unisex? Well, the short answer is no. And maybe we can talk about this some more later, because I suspect that'll come up as we discuss the possibilities of an ordinance later. But the short answer is no, and for whatever reason, there's an incredible focus on bathrooms by some when CCR ordinances are discussed. I know that OSHA has certain requirements of bathrooms and having male and female bathrooms, and I just think that the focus on bathrooms kind of is misdirected when we begin to look at the CCR ordinance, because that's not the focus at all. It doesn't talk about bathrooms, actually.
Thank you. So as a follow-up, why should local business owners want a CCR ordinance passed that could potentially subject them to more lawsuits? Lawsuits.
I think it's important that it's not whether or not it can subject you to more lawsuits, for a couple of reasons. One is the CCR ordinance provides a mechanism that is very cheap from an employer standpoint to resolve disputes about discrimination, much less expensive than if you got sued in federal court. And if you're sued in federal court, you're instantly talking thousands and thousands of dollars. And the CCR ordinance provides a very streamlined process for resolving differences. But why should you want this passed? Well, I think because greater inclusion leads to a more productive, engaged, and dynamic environment for businesses, for their employees, for their customers. And so businesses' workforces are more diverse, their customers are more diverse, and these changing demographics really demand cultural competence on the part of the business. Now, those aren't my words, actually. Those are Geico's words when they lay out their mission and what they believe in. I changed it only so it didn't reference Geico. But that's what one of our largest employers here in Macon, their stance on diversity and inclusion. And so I think that's really the best explanation. It leads to a more productive business. It's better for your employees. It's better for your customers.
No, this panel is not sponsored by Geico, but I appreciate that you brought that in.
And I will say, there are many other businesses here in Macon that have very similar statements. I just pulled that one because it was a nice compact statement.
That's a great point, and one of our largest employers for sure here, so thank you. Bethany, Dr. Bethany, as someone who consults with and finances small businesses in Macon-Bibb, are there benefits to the small business community if a CCR ordinance is passed?
Yeah, so just to maybe get into more detail, Charlie, because I do these days get into the numbers with these small businesses. They're, for one thing, one of the things that struck me yesterday when the councilman from Savannah spoke was, even though their ordinance was only recently enacted, they haven't had any lawsuits yet, right? Or anyone file about discrimination. What he talked about instead was how he thought it had improved relationships within the community, and it better indicated, especially because tourism is so huge for Savannah, that they really are the hostess city of the South. So there's a lot about what you say to your customer base and your potential employers or businesses coming to you if you say, we are inclusive and we're open to business for all. So obviously, on the most pragmatic level, inclusivity is good for the bottom line because you expand your customer base, you expand your market directly. When we launched the Downtown Diversity Initiative with Making Black Pages, and that was focused on improving racial diversity in our business ownership, I mean, the big easy argument was to make is we have closed ourselves off to half of our market. Macon-Bibb is majority Black, and we have closed ourselves off to about half of our market by not promoting more Black-owned businesses, not fostering more Black ownership in our downtown urban core. And we need to do that to change that and bring in more of our community and make downtown more vibrant. Of course, we're a regional center, so that is going to draw even more than just Macon Bibb residents, but that's just pragmatic, best business sense. Then there's the generational trends that Charlie was talking about a little bit. So the millennials and the Zs, they are tolerant. Diversity and inclusion really matters to them. One of the trends that's come out of COVID, it's really a fascinating time to be having these conversations because our workforce and what small business development looks like is changing dramatically. But one of the things that happened during COVID is the change of what they call the customer journey. We started having all this time with our computers and we started like intensely researching our potential businesses. So there's a lot of research now in marketing around the extended customer journey. And what they're doing is researching the heck out of you now. They want to see your values, your core values. How do you represent yourself and your brand? They're researching your products too and your pricing, and they're researching your competitors before they decide who they're going to become loyal to. And that is a huge thing for them to know that you're inclusive, right? And then when they come in, they stay with you longer. Their brand commitment is much more deep and embedded. And we talk about the millennials and the Zs. So my generation is a non-factor. Nobody cares about the X gen, but we talk about the millennials and the Z because there's so many. Their behaviors are so distinct. They really are such a shift in consumer behavior and a lot of behaviors from what we've seen in the past. But the thing is, the boomers go where the cool kids are. This is also like a generational consumer fact. They come where the millennials are hanging out. So their dollars are going to follow if you create the kind of environment where millennials and Zs want to be. So that's the place to focus. I mean, there's also a lot to think about the trajectory of your target customer. So if your target customer is a boomer, I mean, if you're about to close your business down, that's probably fine. But if you're either thinking about selling it or if you're just getting this business started, then you need to be thinking about who's my secondary base here that I'm going to have this lifelong journey with, especially because brand commitment, identity, this extended customer journey is becoming more of a reality in our retail, restaurant, bar world. So that's something to think about. The other thing that's really fascinating and so timely right now is this workforce development crisis. It's a crisis. I don't know if you guys have been seeing this in business news, but people cannot hire up. And they're reopening. And there's some different complications. You know, some people think it's the unemployment benefits. It's definitely more complicated than that. Some people still have to virtually school their children. They can't go back into the workforce. But there are also people just rethinking the whole workforce environment piece. And for a lot of them, it's about inclusivity. And I think that the folks who are going to survive this workforce development crisis are going to be the businesses, the employers who have really started to take inclusivity very seriously. And I think we're going to see that having a major implication. So in a bigger picture, for Macon Bibb to pass an ordinance and say we're being inclusive, we want the kinds of businesses and employees, you know, that embrace an inclusive environment, but then just also like having our small business community really supporting this kind of ordinance and saying that personally as small business owners, you know, that we're committed to these things because that is what folks are looking for, you know, when it comes to where they want to work.
As someone who only a couple of years ago realized that she is a millennial, I'm on the very top end, but you know, there are so many things that I feel like you hit the nail on the head about these different generations and how, like you said, it's so you know their behaviors so well, and I certainly watch those boomers follow right along. So, what are the cool kids doing? Thank you, Bethany. Charisse, through your work at the county level, can you talk about missed opportunities for businesses in Macon if we don't pass this ordinance? Now, for instance, we see other Georgia communities who've embraced this sort of ordinance. I think there are 15 to 17 other communities in Georgia. That may be an old stat, but we know that it's happening here in Georgia. So please, Charisse.
Yeah, most of them are in the metro Atlanta region. Of course, you brought up Savannah and a couple others. And in preparation for this panel, I did talk with a couple businesses in Savannah, and I talked with our local small businesses just to get a feel of what they thought. And Susanna, you hit it right on the head. We need to make sure we have shared language. People are not understanding what this means. So when I was talking to a lot of our small businesses, when we brought up civil rights, they were bringing up the civil rights movement was mostly about achieving true equality for African Americans. But now this term is for all, for race, sex, age, disability, national origin, religion, sexual orientation, and other protected characteristics. So understanding that and what is discrimination, what that means. Macon-Bibb County, with this office, we're all about equity, inclusion, and diversity. I'm working hard to have more minority and women-owned businesses have procurement opportunities with Macon-Bibb County. We are a majority African-American city, so it does not bode well when we don't have enough representation in the small businesses that are getting procurement opportunities, as well as when Dr. Bethany say having a presence here in downtown. So having this ordinance will really showcase that we want inclusion, we want diversity. My kids are the Zers, so I always refer to them because I'm not part of the cool kids, and they truly don't understand some of why we need this. You know, they're more tolerable. My daughter has friends of every race, every religion, every disability, the whole 9 yards. So some of the things that us older people are hung up on, it's not the same. So we're either going to adapt and move forward together, which is one thing we say for Macon-Bibb County, we're moving forward together, or we're going to lose out to other cities that are taking this chance. And I know change is hard. That's why we're doing this educational conference. I've heard a lot of bathroom talk, which I didn't quite understand that. But one thing that Weston said yesterday, that we can be the green book for our community. That means that everyone feels welcome and inclusive. We want businesses to come. And one of the businesses that I taught with in Savannah was in its event space. And they were telling me once they passed this, that they have had people, a new market, 2 people who actually booked their space because they found out that they were inclusive with the CCR. So I think with Macon, we are our location, we're in the middle of the state. We are hub, we have great leadership, and having this will actually bode well in our tourism and getting people to come to our region. We're a city in the park, and I love my community. I could have traveled, but I could have lived in another space, but I love Macon because it's a small town with big town opportunities. But I think this is a great thing for us. And then one last thing on the discrimination things, when people say that discrimination is unfair or unequal treatment of an individual based on certain legally protected characteristics. So as a business owner, you want to have your business for as many customers as you can. So when people talk about, oh, we're going to have lawsuits and things like that, but as a business owner, you're trying to attract as many customer base as you can. So a lot of things that you see here, I don't really think a lot of our small businesses will have trouble with in the future. So.
Good. And Sharice, based on your work with a range of entrepreneurs in Macon-Bibb, how will it impact work environments in Macon-Bibb if there are inclusivity standards business owners and the county government must uphold? So how will it impact environments in Macon-Bibb?
Well, a couple of the small businesses I taught with, the reason why they are small business entrepreneurs is because they were treated in their mind unfairly at their workplace. So they wanted to get out on their own and be a steward of their own fate. So as we are being more inclusive. And like Dr. Bethany said, it's a workforce crisis. I see it all the time. I have people calling me about how we can get more people hired. We got to show people that people want them. I'm a Black woman here in Macon, and I'll be quite honest. A lot of times I go to meetings. Well, in the past, I didn't feel invited. I didn't feel inclusive. I just felt like an outsider. And if I felt that way, I know numerous other minority people have felt that way. So we got to do a bold move to say, listen, we want you at the table. We want you to be a part of the process. And having this will help that process. And I know for the leadership that we have now with our commissioner, I've seen a couple of our commissioners listening in, our mayor, they are open to listening to what the community wants. And if the community wants us moving forward together, then something like this is something that we need to push forward.
That whole statement of Macon, we are open for business. So I'm hearing it kind of both literally and figuratively. Not only are our doors open and ready to accept, but we're also ready to open and accept all types and backgrounds of people. So thank you for that, Sharice. Bethany, in the context of economic and downtown development, how would or could the passage of a CCR ordinance affect business recruitment and development overall?
The wrong tab there. I knew I was getting in trouble. DeMarcus, if you're out there, I was trying not to pull a DeMarcus like yesterday. So this is a great question, because this is really changing too in the world of economic and community development. So there's still, like yesterday, Representative Sam Park talked about how Atlanta is vying for the World Cup, and how, of course, because it's probably the most racially diverse major sport in the world, right? Soccer. So you've got to show that you're an inclusive global city to pull in those kinds of big events. But anymore, when it comes to development, economic development, it's actually about community development. And there's been a couple studies done by the Knight Foundation. These were on my brain anyway, thinking about this conference before, and then I realized that they were a sponsor. And they did one a decade ago that was called The Soul of the Community. And then they did an update to that was called Community Ties. And Macon was in both of them because we're fortunate enough to be a Knight city. And one of the things that they found was, or basically what they're trying to show is the connection between either attachment to place, community attachment and belonging, and just economic vitality, and the qualities that those things promote. How do people come to feel attached to place and feel ownership, so that they do invest more and so that the economy expands. And the big factor that they talked about in the Soul of the Community study about a decade ago was openness. Being open to all kinds of people. And unfortunately for the mid-sized tiered cities in that Knight survey, Macon fell at the bottom on those things. We fell at the bottom, and in particular, we were low on being welcoming to the lesbian and gay community. The update to that just happened, the studies came out last year. The Community Ties study looked a little more at the idea of safe places for work and play for the whole community. And we again lagged behind there just a little bit. But the reason all those things really matter when it comes now to business and economic development, again, generational trends, is that the Millennials and the Zs choose where they want to live, not what kind of job they want. They choose where they want to live. Then they move there. Then they either get a job or now they work remotely. And based on other COVID research we've seen, a lot more of them are starting their own jobs. So there's this whole COVIDpreneur trend that's also happening. So it's about finding that inclusive community and then starting your business or joining a workforce. And there's also a lot of correlation between businesses being more sustainable if they're started locally right? And the amount of growth that often happens that tends to come from the inside out versus that traditional recruitment that we used to see. Like, hey, we're so amazing, come here. Well, now it's really more a matter from the ground up, so to speak, when it comes to economic development, especially small business, small scale producers, small business models. And so it's just all the more reason to keep working and pushing hard on what it means to be a better educated community around these issues, and then doing what we need to do to not just enact the ordinance, I think, but learn what it means to more authentically create accessible spaces, right? And build more pathways to ownerships for our own folks here in Macon Bibb.
Both of those night studies are, I'm not sure quite the proper term for this, but didn't they ask people in the community these questions to gain the knowledge?
Yeah, I mean, and they are based on Macon Bibb. So yeah. I know we have that expo center. I could share these things with Arian and Scott, but they are fascinating, and they have the data set specifically for our community. So it is.
Anna concluded it.
Anna just shared it, but they did have.
Nice, Anna. Thanks.
Anna.
That's it. I'm sure some of you in the audience today were included in those questions, but I remember, just realizing some of those truths, especially in that 10 years ago, that these are our people speaking the truth here, that it's not somebody that just came in and said, let's do a survey. So that's good. Thank you, Bethany. I want to go to you now, Charlie, back to you. There's a federal legislation in place. There is federal legislation in place to protect civil rights, and some state measures as well. So why is it even necessary or beneficial to pass a CCR ordinance in Macon Bibb?
Well, there's, of course, the legal answer, which is that not all businesses are covered by the federal legislation, depending on what specific legislation you're talking about. But generally, the federal non-discrimination statutes apply to businesses that have 15 or more employees. And so that's one reason, is that not everybody is covered by the federal legislation. And it seems somewhat to me, perhaps to others, that it's inequitable that all businesses are not on the same playing field. And although you asked me this because I'm a lawyer, and this is a completely non-lawyer answer I'm about to give you, I think the real reason it's important for us is because it's a declaration of who we are as a community. That's the real reason it's important. It's a declaration of who we are, our acceptance as a community. As Bethany was talking, my mind started thinking back about things that draw people to Macon. My wife and I, what we do, or at least what we used to do before the world turned upside down with COVID and performing venues shut down, we went to live music. That was our hobby. And that's really kind of what put Macon on the map, at least in my memory. And what was running through my mind while we've been talking about the CCR ordinance and what Bethany was talking about, what draws people here, what makes people stay, was a t-shirt that I've seen that says, "The king of rock and roll was a gay black man from Macon, Georgia." I mean, that
t-shirt.
yeah. I mean, that kind of captures a lot about Macon. Yeah, there you go. And so, to me, the biggest reason for this is that it's a statement of who we are, and that we are receptive and open to people with different views, different lifestyles. I think I'm pretty clearly the oldest person on this panel, and I'm being educated constantly about things not that I was necessarily closed-minded about, but was just oblivious to. So that's another reason that I think this ordinance is important, is it brings to the forefront things that we need to remember are important. So I will ramble on if you don't stop me, Rob.
And Charles, can I piggyback on this? This ordinance will actually help us have open conversations to help us move forward. Everyone knows Macon was one of the most redline cities in the U.S. We had people being sold on Poplar Street. We have a lot of hurt history. When you have ordinances and things like this, it actually helped with the healing process. It helped with our community moving forward. And as I was talking to small businesses, they were, I actually talked to about 15. They were open to this because they think that it will increase their customer base. It will show who we are, but also give us opportunities to have open conversations. So we don't have like, a Black business or a white business. It's just a business that serve a customer base for all. So I like this inclusive nature, and I think it's going to bode well for Macon-Bibb County.
You're absolutely, I agree, Sharice. And something I think about too, and something you said, Bethany, in the previous question or response, that, there's so many people that I think we're getting better about it, but we like to compare ourselves to other cities, and we're going to be the next, you name it. Like, people love to do that to us. And I totally disagree with that. I think we need to be Macon, and we're going to be Macon. We are Macon because of so many unique reasons that that take us beyond anybody on the map, I believe. And so I think that also to as a counter to that is a lot of people that say those things about wanting to be the next whatever, or I just went and visited this town, this city, and it's awesome. I wish we were more like that. I'm willing to bet and go out on a line and say that those places that you love and want to be a part of and envision yourself or envision those elements being here in Macon, those are inclusive cities. Those are cities who are welcoming and open. And I think that I bet the majority of those cities that you would say that you love being in and you love to visit. That's why I'm to the point again about how much they spoke yesterday, the attorneys, about tourism, especially Mr. Purdy, am I saying his name right? In Savannah, about how, and Bethany, you touched on this, how important that all-inclusive mindset, energy, and of course, formality of their CCR ordinance is for their tourism. Y'all know Savannah's got the tourism down. So so this is kind of to open it up to the whole group. And Sharice, I'm glad you piped in there, because these next are geared for all of you to speak however you will, and of course make this conversational if you'd like. But because this was a huge argument against the whole passage of a CCR ordinance in Macon-Bibb, why should small business owners support the passage of an ordinance that might conflict with their faith beliefs? Anybody want to speak to that?
Well, first of all, I think we pointed out earlier that this ordinance, in fact, protects everyone. So I also cannot discriminate against people because of their faith if I'm a business owner, right? Anything egregious that someone does to someone else is still against the law. I think that's where some of the confusion and the fear comes into play. But I think the biggest thing, that we must keep having these conversations, and we must keep educating ourselves, because the fears and the things that people put up against why we shouldn't do these things are very unsubstantiated. I mean, the law professor said we can't legislate against non-realities, right? So what we need to do together is be able to understand and better understand communities where they have passed these things. A lot of the transgender stuff that's going on in the schools right now, better educating ourselves to be able to show folks that this is unsubstantiated, that the fears you have really, this is not what comes to pass when a community embraces and passes a comprehensive civil rights ordinance. And change is hard. Therese mentioned that earlier. Humans don't do it well. And the older we get, the harder it is for us. I mean, that's just a fact of life. So, you know, I think that's some of our work in moving forward with this, is for people to understand that it actually really protects you more in your faith and religious beliefs. And that B, it doesn't invite characters to your business or what have you that are going to offend your religious beliefs, that those fears, the things that we've cooked up and that we've been gotten really afraid of, are really not the realities that come to pass when a CCR ordinance is put in place.
And I tell everybody, Jesus loved everyone, you know, and we talk about Christians and beliefs, but he loved everybody. He was inclusive of everyone. He talked to everyone. So as we're talking about your faith, if we truly want to have Christ-like characteristics, and I'm not trying to get out of business, but he loved everyone. And this is what this ordinance is about. It is about everyone having equal free rights. What it was about 100 years ago, women couldn't vote. You know, Black folks, you know, only to 1965 that we had some additional votes and, you know, voting rights. So this is just for everybody having equal opportunities for what we all want: pursuit of happiness and the best life we can live. So if anyone has any questions, I just say, pray about it, look at your Bible, and just realize that what we're trying to do is not brain surgery. We just want everybody to be treated equally.
Yeah, it's both not surprising and disappointing at the same time that concerns that a non-discrimination statute would conflict with somebody's faith beliefs. And I say that as somebody who, I mean, practically everybody in my family is a minister but me. My father, my sister, my father-in-law, and folks, you know, ancestors as well. And, you know, maybe there's a reason I'm not a minister, probably is, but, you know, it's astounding to me that's the concern, because a CCR ordinance would not affect religious organizations, and those would not be affected by a CCR ordinance, and we've moved past the point, thankfully, that whether or not you can discriminate on the basis of race is a religious question. You know, a century ago, we were in the middle of that discussion. And so really, when the question is raised about it might conflict with their faith beliefs, I think that really focuses on sexual orientation and gender identity. And what the ordinance is trying to do, it's not trying to change anybody's faith beliefs, but it's trying to say, regardless of your sexual orientation, and this is a phrase I didn't know until recently because I'm sometimes out of it, regardless of the fact that I'm a cisgendered white male, I should still be given equal consideration for a job that I can do. If I'm qualified for a job, the fact that I'm a cisgendered white male should not be a consideration. Or if someone is gay, that should not be a consideration. It's just whether or not you can do a job. And it's sad that the question may be offering somebody a job based on their qualifications as opposed to some other characteristic that's going to conflict with your faith beliefs. I hope we can move beyond that. That makes me think of, although this case didn't deal with discrimination or religious beliefs, one of the phrases from it, there's an old decision, Supreme Court decision, that dealt with the Eighth Amendment, which prohibits cruel and unusual punishment. And the court's struggling with, what does it mean? What does cruel and unusual punishment mean? And so the opinion written by Justice Earl Warren said that the Eighth Amendment must draw its meaning from the evolving standards of decency that mark the progress of a maturing society. And that seems to me to have some application here in this context. Not that your religious beliefs have to change, but our understanding of people's rights to have employment, rights to have housing, rights to access to public accommodation should not be based on characteristics like gender identity or sexual orientation.
You all, and a little cliffhanger here for more on that conversation. Join the conversation at 1 p.m. with Dr. Karen Bragg, more on faith. Moving into kind of, well, I think related, how do we combat the fear and misunderstandings that have come out of efforts to pass CCR ordinances in Macon and elsewhere, especially in the local business communities? So how do we combat the fear and misunderstandings? I'll just note that yesterday Dr. Crease said in the morning, fear is not sufficient grounds. How do we combat the fear and misunderstandings?
It's what we're doing now. You know, we have to have these honest conversations, and sometimes they're uncomfortable, you know, and I know on the table, Macon has been a huge proponent of getting people to get out of their comfort zones and talk about things. And we're all different on this panel, but we can all have a good conversation. Charles, I really appreciate you saying that you're learning more. And we have a lot. We all have different experiences. And I appreciate when someone asks me about my experiences, and then they have a different perspective on things. So we just got to continue what we're doing, have these honest conversations, but also incorporating policies and ordinances that kind of, I don't want to say force people to move forward, but put some parameters in place so we can continue to move forward.
Is the question, how do you combat fear and misunderstandings as it relates to a CCR ordinance? And as it relates to the CCR ordinance, fear, I think, comes from what you don't know, or what you're unsure about, or how you think it may affect you. And misunderstandings come from that lack of knowledge too. You fear that which is different, or which you've been told is different. And you're right, Sharice, it's the conversations we have. In my practice of law, one of the greatest educations I had was in representing an entity that when I went to a board meeting, I was the minority in the room. That was a new experience for me when that started. And it was a profound experience, because I realized, I may be a good lawyer, but there's a lot I don't understand just because my experience is different. And so I need to listen, I need to ask questions, and I need to have some humility to realize that there may be some points of view that are confusing to me because I don't have the same life experience. And I need to listen to that and try to understand where that's coming from. That's the same thing that needs to happen, I believe, as we look at this CCR ordinance. And how do you combat the fear and misunderstanding? We need to listen. We need to listen with humility, and recognize there are paths that other people have taken that we don't understand until we engage in conversation with them. And we will only partially understand it then. I had a friend tell me years ago when we were in college. And he told me, he said, Charlie, you and I are going to be all right as long as you understand you will never really know what it's like to be a Black man in America. And I was like, okay. Obviously, that comment has stuck with me. And that's the kind of attitude we need to take so that we get under the fear and misunderstanding so that we can listen to people without judgment to understand where they're coming from.
Can I say, Charles, you say everybody else in your family are ministers, but I'm going to add preacher cause to that because spreading the gospel on that. Everything you just said. Amen.
So my follow-up to that would be pretty personal, but I think a lot of us are experiencing this. So, you know, before I don't know what's going to define this last year of our lives more. COVID, the racial reckoning, some of the things we've seen around and the discrimination, especially that our transgender youth is experiencing. Obviously, it's all of it together. But one of the things for me personally is it's clear where it used to be enough for me to say, racism is wrong. That's not enough anymore. But to get out of that, and to be a true ally, or as my friend and colleague Erin Keller says, a success partner, we're wading into new waters, and they are not comfortable. And they are challenging. I think we all probably need a lot of therapy. I think we all probably need to legitimately think about what it means to create some support groups. If we are allies, and to learn how to do this better as we reach out so that we're truly building bridges, and not hoping that we are, but building true bridges. And I think we need to really think about what it's going to mean to support ourselves in this work, and how can we continue to create environments and events like this where we can have the conversations and learn so that we do get better at the work.
Thank you. Y'all are just so right on, I think. Yesterday in the panel on civil rights law, Representative Sam Park said, hate is bad for business. Elaborate further for us on the value of passing a CCR ordinance and why it's good for business.
Well, I think we touched on this obviously a lot. I think though that I would say that it's not just hate now, or I think we're going to find soon that it's not just hate that's bad for business, so is silence. And that kind of, like I was just saying, just saying that I'm against racism is not enough anymore. I remember there was I can't remember the gentleman's name, but when we saw this in Georgia too, but he owned some professional teams in Utah and came out against the Black Lives Matters movement. And in this article, they were comparing him to his fellow brothers who had similar political orientations, but who weren't getting into the mire, so to speak, politically, and how they were faring so much better and how pragmatic that was from a business standpoint. But I don't think it's going to be long before that's not sufficient. And that goes back again, especially to those millennials and Zs. And I think they're going to expect more of us. I think we're starting to see this even with our corporate leaders and the tensions we're seeing around the Georgia voting laws and stuff. But I think that it's not just going to be that hate is bad for business. It's also going to be that actively working to be inclusive and actively, working to create inclusive work environments are going to be the expectation to thrive in the small business world.
A year ago, maybe it was more than that actually, I was, again, because that was before the world turned upside down with COVID, but we were at a panel where some people were discussing the music business, and there were some folks from Asheville talking about the structure of the music business there and how they worked with each other. And one of the business owners made the comment that came to mind here. He said, cooperation is a good business model, talking about how the business is operated, and each worked to a certain extent with each other in Asheville. And that came to mind as we began talking about this statement in the question, or the statement, hate is bad for business. You know, cooperation, openness is a good business model. I was in again, my wife and I were in a Uber a couple of years ago, and we were talking to the driver, and she was talking about things she'd like to do. And before you know it, we were telling her, you need to come down to Macon. You know, we've got stuff going on down here. You need to come down to Macon and visit. And started telling her about the things that were happening, what was going on downtown, the music festivals we have, the music venues we have. And that was because Macon is increasingly an open and diverse community. And it's someplace, it's not just someplace that somebody would want to come to, it's someplace I want to convince somebody to come to. So not only is hate bad for business, I mean, the opposite of inclusion is good for business. It's a magnet.
Right. And I'm going to piggyback on that. The demographics of Macon is changing from our college students that are choosing to stay here in Macon to our immigrant population that is growing, the people who've been here for generations. What's the point of walking around hating half of the people in your community? I mean, it doesn't work. And if you are, if you do have a small business, you want the biggest client base you can possibly have. And that's one of the things I've been talking with the small businesses that are coming through the Office of Small Business Affairs is, how are you branding yourself? How are you being inclusive? How are you preparing yourself? Because it is going to be a shift after this COVID-19 of how companies are going to be sustainable. You know, what's your presence on the internet? You know, the whole 9 yards. And I can assure you, and Suzanne, we've been on several panels together, but we've known each other a long time, but even your emails and things like that. I've had people had to change their emails because they have to be, you know, inclusive and really brand themselves. So it's all about, if you want your business to grow, this is going to be part of it, being inclusive and listening to the community that you serve.
Thank y'all. I feel like we have covered a lot of ground here, and I know that you know, you may have a specific closing thought, but I think this might be a good time if y'all are willing to let us take a few questions from the audience. And y'all do not hesitate to say there's specifically one that you wanna take on. I picked out one I wanted to start with, and thank you, Sarah, for submitting this. She says, how can a more inclusive business environment change other aspects of discrimination in our communities, just such as discrimination happening in other sectors like education, government services, like policing, and sort of the synergy from something like this? Do y'all, either of you want to speak to this?
That requires a little thought, I think, to respond to that question.
I do think that, you know, we really see a burgeoning social entrepreneurial community in this country. I don't have a background in business and small business. It's been a really exciting place to work, though, because I feel like in the United States, our business culture really drives so much else. And other institutions often follow the creativity and problem solving that we see that happens in the private sector. And so I think that if our business community takes the lead on this, if we start to see the kinds of positive quality of life impacts that it can promote, and also that it brings about good. And again, not these just horrific kinds of things that people imagine a CCR brings about, then I think it's just going to be easier to see those kinds of changes happen across the other sectors, of major community life that Sarah mentions in her question.
I keep looking back at this question that you read, Susanna. How can a more inclusive business environment change other aspects of discrimination in our communities? And I think that that may in part go back to what we talked about earlier, was the fear and misunderstanding. And we are in an era now that sometimes our businesses take a leadership role in helping to break through barriers of fear and misunderstanding. And I think that's how an inclusive business environment can change other aspects of discrimination. It's to break through that inclusiveness will help break through that fear and misunderstanding. The ordinance, that the CCR ordinance really in this instance would bring businesses into line with what Macon and Bibb County has already said is its policy of non-discrimination. And I think that's important to point out, that Macon, Bibb County was important. I don't remember exactly when it passed, but when they amended their charter to prohibit discrimination on the basis of, I think it was sexual orientation and gender identity. I don't have that in front of me, but this CCR ordinance would bring businesses into line where, contrary to what I just said, with Macon, Bibb County, the county government took the lead in that.
I just concur with everyone else and what they're saying. One of the other questions was about, and I guess I'm uniquely situated to address this, about the hairstyles and textures. I have gotten discriminated. I love my afro. I wear it a lot. I wear several different hairstyles. But I want to share a personal story. When my son was growing up, he had dreadlocks. He went to a private school, and it was an issue with his dreadlocks. And as we're being more inclusive, we need to support the natural hair that comes out of Black people hair, as can be professional, and the whole 9 yards. So as we're looking at tweaking this, maybe even looking at including that, because that's being inclusive of us, because I've had discrimination based on my hair, which is weird to me because it's my natural hair that comes out of my head.
And Representative Park mentioned that one of his colleagues had introduced a Crown Act to the Georgia legislature, but there's been no movement. So it has been introduced, but no movement at the state level on something that would prevent that kind of discrimination.
Well, I'll follow up on that.
Yeah, I was going to say sort of feel like if we're leveling, if we're going to have this shared lens, what can we do? Can we add that in? I think, and that's something that I wanted to share, that looking at how I think what I want to get to is the next one of the other questions that Marty has shared, is that we're all participating because we believe in promoting inclusivity and equity in our workplaces, in our community at large. There may be some people on this in this audience that are not in that space, I'll just say, but how do we spread the word to others, to businesses we frequent? And I will say, personally, as a business owner, I know that anytime somebody praises, or I certainly have gotten hate mail. I've gotten some not so kind letters in the mail. And when I hear any feedback, I really, my next question is always, tell me why. Why was that a good issue? Why was that not so great to you? You know, that feedback is so valuable as a business owner. And I feel like to connect to that, it's that to me, again, as a business owner, that sharing your experience and why this is valuable to you really does help with the synergy of any maybe fears or concerns. And not to speak over anything that you all have to say, but I do think that Macon is one of our greatest strengths, and perhaps sometimes a weakness is our word of mouth culture. You know, we see something, we say something, you know, we want to talk about it and share it and bring others to it. So what do y'all think? How do we spread the word to others, to businesses we frequent? I guess thinking about specifically patroning businesses.
A common thread, all our panelists, I can tell just in how we're talking, we all love Macon. I can tell it in what we're saying and the comments on the side, we all love Macon. I think as we're, like Charles said, just listening, you know, people do have fears, and I get it. Fears is not an excuse, but we got to have some humility and understanding maybe where this fear is coming from, and then letting them speak. Sometimes people just want to speak on it and get it out, and then they're okay with, you know, moving forward. So we just got to have patience with this process. Change is hard. And as we're frequenting these businesses, let them know. I think for me personally, my life is so much richer because I have diverse friends. I have drag queens. I have white people, Black people. I mean, I got hippies, and I feel like my life is so much richer because I have just a sense of purpose in listening to so many people. So anyway, I'm just rambling on. I need coffee, you guys. I need coffee.
That question talked about promoting inclusivity and equality, and how do we spread the word to others, to businesses we frequent? And so the answer may be in the question. Because I was just pondering this. And of course, in my own mind, there are occasions when I think, I don't need to give my money to that person or to that business. But really, you know, we're not going to spread the word if we confine our conversations to people who already share the same beliefs that we have. And so you're not going to change anything except reinforce a division if you don't go in and have the conversation with somebody who doesn't agree with you. And so I guess maybe the way you share this in part depends on the businesses that you frequent and the communications that you have with them, which I will admit at times is contrary to my general nature, which on occasions can be vindictive, and that might lead back to why I'm not a minister, but that's a different discussion. But I think that answer is in the question. It depends on who we frequent and the conversations we have with them.
I think that y'all know in just a couple of minutes, Scott is going to come back on and join us. I do see something here that I'm curious to what you all think, that this is something to kind of connect us to this next panel. But Jim Crisp says, can we agree that the real stumbling block in the CCR is the issue surrounding transgender identity and acceptance of transgender youth, especially as this comes up against faith-based concerns? What do y'all think? I mean, is that, kind of, you feel like that's the word on the street? You feel like that's a major concern for us, especially, I think, especially thinking about the history of this here in the fall?
100%.
Mm-hmm.
100%.
Okay.
That was what was driving the opposition, or a significant part of the opposition before, and combine that with misinformation and stereotypes about transgenders and people's fear about going to the restroom. That absolutely was what provided the heat to the opposition before. When you, and thinking about today and getting ready for today, I actually went back and I pulled a piece that's best practices, and it's a guide to restroom access for transgender workers. And it's from that bastion of liberal thought, OSHA. And that's what they put out. And in their best practices, they talk about, a person who identifies as a man should be permitted to use men's restrooms, and a person who identifies as a woman should be permitted to use women's restrooms. But they go on at length and address the transgender issue. And I think what really provided the heat was this trope that transgender individuals are somehow a threat to people, and that a transgender man will go in a woman's restroom and he'll prey on our women and children. And that's just a fundamental misunderstanding of what transgender is, and mistakes it for criminality. The truth is, transgender individuals are already going to the restroom, using the same restrooms we use. We just don't know it because we have the decency, or we haven't thought about asking them about their gender at birth. So the short answer is yes, that absolutely was a driving factor in the opposition before.
Yeah, it was. And I think it that alone, maybe we could attribute to why it didn't get passed. However, I think we missed an opportunity as a community to get on board for the value of this, for all the reasons and ways that we need to fight for inclusivity and equity, and for all the ways we need to better understand the value of it. Obviously the practical legal value, but I think more so, especially when we talk about in the business and business development realm, the community impact that it has when you say we respect and provide a safe place for everybody. And so I think our team, I'll shout out Scott in particular right now, just because he headed up this panel, but I think they know that that's why the value of this and why we're here today is to build that coalition, so that when we do move forward with this the next time, that we can take it all the way home.
Absolutely. And I just want to read one short excerpt from that OSHA document I referred before, because I think it ties back in with part of what you were saying, Bethany. And it says, gender identity is an intrinsic part of each person's identity in everyday life. Accordingly, authorities on gender issues counsel that it is essential for employees to be able to work in a manner consistent with how they live the rest of their daily lives, based on their gender identity. Restricting employees to using only restrooms that are not consistent with their gender identity, or segregating them from other workers by requiring them to use gender neutral or other specific restrooms, singles those employees out and may make them fear for their physical safety. There's a lot we can learn, and a lot of fear and misunderstanding that we can focus on eliminating, I think, specifically with transgender issues.
Thank you. Yeah. Do y'all anything anything to close with, a closing thought, or anything that you feel like you didn't get to say? Or
Well, Suzanne, I just want to say, if you get anything from this panel, is that we're just trying to have a safe space for everyone and being inclusive. And I think any of the panelists would be amenable to having a conversation if you have any questions afterwards. But we need to just continue these conversations so we won't have fear, and that we can all move forward together.
thank you. Right on brand with that forward together there, Sharice. I like it. Macon County. Bring it. Scott, our main man. What you got?
Hey, Susanna. Thank you for welcoming me back. I want to thank you so much, Susanna, for moderating and hosting this discussion. I appreciate it from the bottom of my heart. You did an amazing job, and I thank you so much. And to Charlie and Bethany and Sharice, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. I could not have asked for a better group of people to discuss these topics today. Y'all have me energized, and I cannot wait for the faith panel this afternoon at 1 p.m. Thank you, audience, for showing up today and being part of this very important discussion. This afternoon at 1 p.m., we will continue the discussion with the faith panel. I can't wait for y'all to join us for that one. And if you have heard something or things have resonated inside of you, raised more questions for you, please feel free to join the CCR committee tomorrow afternoon at 3 p.m. at Fall Line Brewery, downtown Macon. And we will have a very unstructured, informal gathering where we can try to answer your questions and continue this discussion and help move Macon forward. I will see y'all at 1 p.m. And thank you so much for showing up today.
Thank you all. Thank you, Scott.